Starting with number 1, Mark I tank, United Kingdom, 1916. When the British Army unveiled the Mark I on the Somme in September 1916, it introduced something the world had never encountered, a machine that could cross trenches, crush barbed wire, and absorb small arms fire while advancing on positions that had resisted human assault for 2 years. That was what made it dangerous, not its speed, which was barely 4 miles per hour, and not its thin armor, but the psychological rupture it caused. German infantry, trained to hold ground against every known weapon, had no doctrine, no counter, and no frame of reference for what they were seeing. Entire defensive positions broke and fled. The Mark I's 57mm guns and machine guns, firing from a moving armored platform, were lethal in a context where men had been dying by the thousands to gain yards. Of the 49 deployed at Flers-Courcelette, fewer than a third reached enemy lines, but those that did proved a principle that would govern warfare for the next century. The tank had arrived, and nothing about land warfare would ever be the same. Number 2, A7V Sturmpanzerwagen, Germany, 1918. Germany's response to the British tank came in the form of the A7V, an enormous steel fortress carrying 18 men, a 57mm cannon, and 6 machine guns designed to overwhelm any position it could reach. Its danger was concentrated in its firepower. Nothing on the Western Front could match the volume of fire an A7V could project while remaining mobile and under armor. In the first tank-versus-tank engagement in history at Villers-Brenner in April 1918, an A7V crew demonstrated that armored vehicles could destroy other armored vehicles, a tactical revelation that would define the next World War. Against infantry and machine gun nests, the A7V was devastating, capable of suppressing entire defensive positions simultaneously with its multiple weapon stations. But its high center of gravity made it catastrophically unstable on slopes, and shell craters, the defining terrain of the Western Front, could immobilize it completely. Its mechanical unreliability was severe, and of roughly 20 ever built, several were lost not to enemy fire, but to their own failures. The A7V was genuinely dangerous when it functioned. The tragedy of German armor in 1918 was that it so rarely did. Number 3, French Char 2C, France, 1921. France built the Char 2C as the most powerful land weapon on Earth, and for over a decade, that claim was essentially accurate. At 69 tons, with a 75mm cannon in its primary turret and a machine gun turret at the rear, the Char 2C outweighed and outgunned every other tank in existence throughout the 1920s and into the 1930s. Its armor, at up to 45mm thickness, was impervious to the anti-tank weapons of its era. Had the tank it was designed for, the mass infantry assaults of the First World War, continued into 1919, the Char 2C would have been a weapon of decisive dominance. The fear it generated was real. Germany's propaganda ministry, upon learning that the French were moving Char 2CS by rail in 1940, targeted them specifically and immediately. 5 were destroyed in German air attacks on their transport trains. The remaining crews detonated their own vehicles rather than allow capture. France's most powerful tank never fired a shot in the war that destroyed France, a monument to the dangerous gap between a weapon's theoretical power and the war it actually has to fight. Number 4, Soviet T-35, Soviet Union, 1932. The T-35 was the most heavily armed tank on Earth when it entered Soviet service, 5 turrets mounting a 76mm cannon, 2 45mm guns, and multiple machine guns, theoretically capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously across an entire arc of fire. Against the fortified positions it was designed to assault, the T-35 could have been genuinely overwhelming, walking fire from multiple calibers into defensive works while advancing under armor. In Red Square parades through the 1930s, it projected Soviet power so effectively that foreign military attaches filed urgent reports home. Hitler's planners specifically noted it. But the T-35's danger was almost entirely theoretical. Coordinating 5 separate turrets required a crew of 11 with no reliable internal communication. Its armor, despite the tank's massive appearance, reached only 30mm at its thickest, inadequate against even light anti-tank guns by 1941. During Operation Barbarossa, the overwhelming majority broke down during withdrawal marches before ever engaging the enemy. The T-35 was dangerous as a symbol. As a weapon, it was hollow, and the Soviet Union paid in blood for every illusion it had maintained. Number 5, Italian Carro Armato P-40, Italy, 1943. The P-40 was Italy's most dangerous tank, and understanding that phrase requires understanding how desperate Italy's armored situation had become. With 50 millimeters of frontal armor and a 75 millimeters gun capable of threatening Allied medium tanks at combat ranges, the P-40 represented a genuine leap beyond the light. Undergunned vehicles Italian crews had been dying in since 1940. Against the M4 Sherman at standard engagement distances, a well-positioned P-40 could score penetrating hits, a capability Italian tankers had not possessed in any prior vehicle. Had it entered service in 1941 or even 1942, it might have meaningfully altered the armor balance in North Africa. But Italy's industrial base, crippled by Allied bombing, naval blockade, and years of strategic overextension, could not produce it in time or quantity. When Italy's armistice came in September 1943, the P-40 existed in only handfuls. Germany seized the factories and the vehicles. The P-40's danger was real in specification and non-existent in impact, a weapon the war consumed before it could be used. Number 6. TOG-2, United Kingdom, 1941. The TOG-2 was, in one specific and significant sense, genuinely dangerous. Its 17-pounder gun was among the most lethal anti-tank weapons produced by any nation during the Second World War, capable of defeating the armor of any German tank in existence at the time of the prototype's completion. Had that gun been mounted in a vehicle that could actually move, maneuver, and survive on a fluid modern battlefield, it would have been formidable. But the TOG-2 weighed 81 tons and reached barely 8.5 miles per hour. In a war where tank engagements turned on the ability to close range, find cover, exploit flanks, and withdraw under fire, those numbers were a death sentence. A static 17-pounder was an artillery piece, not a tank. The Committee of First World War veterans who designed the TOG-2 understood the weapon they had built for the mud, the wire, the fixed trenches of 1917. What they could not accept was that war had changed utterly. Only one prototype was ever built. It survives in a museum at Bovington, the most powerful gun in the least survivable vehicle, a study in what happens when the right weapon is built for the wrong war. Number 7. German Panzerkampfwagen 8 Maus, Germany, 1944. The Maus was the most heavily protected vehicle ever to move under its own power, and that protection was the source of its genuine danger. At 240 millimeters of frontal armor, it was essentially immune to virtually every Allied tank gun and most dedicated anti-tank weapons at any practical combat range. Its 128 millimeters main gun, the largest fitted to any tank in the war, could destroy any Allied or Soviet armored vehicle at distances exceeding 3,500 meters, far beyond the range at which anything it might face could threaten it in return. In concept, the Maus represented something terrifying. A vehicle that could advance without fear, absorb everything directed at it, and kill at ranges that made retaliation impossible. But at 188 tons, it destroyed every road surface it crossed, could not traverse any bridge in Europe, and required it to ford rivers submerged, using a snorkel while a companion vehicle supplied power. Its engine was chronically insufficient for its mass. 2 prototypes were built and destroyed by their own crews in 1945. The Maus proved something important. A weapon that cannot move to the battle is not dangerous, it is simply expensive. Number 8. Japanese Type 4 Chieftain, Japan, 1944. In the context of Pacific armored warfare, the Chieftain was dangerous in a way that American planners found genuinely alarming when intelligence on it emerged. Its high-velocity 75mm gun could penetrate the frontal armor of the M4 Sherman at ranges up to 1,000 meters, a capability that virtually no Japanese tank before it possessed. American tank crews who had operated in the Pacific with a degree of armored impunity suddenly faced the prospect of an adversary that could engage and destroy them at standard combat distances. Combined with its armor of up to 75mm on the turret face, the Chieftain was the first Japanese tank that could fight a Sherman on remotely equal terms. That equality was what made it so threatening, and what made Japan's failure to produce it in numbers so strategically consequential. Fewer than 200 were completed. Most never left the home islands. American planners preparing for Operation Downfall, the projected invasion of Japan, specifically assessed the Chieftain as a serious threat to landing forces. The invasion never came, but the fear the Chieftain generated was the most accurate measure of what it could have done. Number 9. M3 Lee, United States, 1941. What made the M3 Lee dangerous was the one thing got right, its 75mm gun. In 1941, when it reached British forces in North Africa, That gun was more powerful than anything the Germans expected to find mounted on an Allied tank at that stage of the war. German panzer commanders who had grown accustomed to engaging British tanks armed with 2-pounder guns, effective against light armor but inadequate against medium tanks, suddenly encounter a weapon that could threaten their Panzer IIIs and IVs at combat range. In the opening engagements where the M3 appeared, it achieved kills that had been previously impossible for British armor. The shock was real and documented in German after-action reports. But the hull-mounted gun's fixed traverse forced the entire tank to rotate to aim, exposing the full profile to return fire. At Gazala in May 1942, that vulnerability was exploited with precision. The M3 was dangerous at the moment it fired. It was a target the moment it moved to do so. The contradiction was built into its structure, and no crew skill could fully resolve it. Number 10. Churchill Crocodile, United Kingdom, 1944. The Churchill Crocodile was dangerous in a way that transcended armor specifications and ballistic performance. It produced terror. A stream of burning fuel projected up to 110 meters, capable of flooding a pillbox, a bunker, or a building with fire that cannot be extinguished by any means available to the men inside. Against fortified positions in northwest Europe in 1944 and 1945, the Crocodile rendered cover meaningless. German troops who had held concrete emplacements against artillery, aircraft, and infantry assaults surrendered to crocodiles before the weapon was even fired. The sight and sound of the flame projector preparing to discharge was sufficient. Documented accounts from multiple engagements record German positions capitulating at the appearance of the vehicle. That psychological power was the Crocodile's most dangerous quality. But its operators paid a price. German forces captured Crocodile crews and executed them, recognizing the weapon as something that operated beyond the conventions of armored combat. The Crocodile's danger was absolute within its range. So was the risk of the men who used it. Number 11. IS-2, Soviet Union, 1944. The IS-2 was specifically designed to be dangerous to German heavy armor, and it succeeded with a lethality that profoundly disturbed Wehrmacht tank commanders. Its 122mm gun, firing a shell of extraordinary mass at high velocity, did not merely penetrate German armor, it caused catastrophic structural failure. Contemporary accounts and German after-action reports describe IS-2 hits that tore turrets from Tiger tanks and detonated ammunition stowage instantaneously. At 1,500 meters, the IS-2 could defeat the frontal armor of a Tiger I, the tank German crews had considered nearly invulnerable. Tiger and Panther commanders, accustomed to engaging Soviet armor from positions of technical superiority, suddenly faced a vehicle they could not reliably destroy from the front at medium range. German armor doctrine was forced to adapt. Avoid IS-2s, call for air support, engage only from the flanks at close range. That the IS-2 required separate loading of shell and propellant, limiting its rate of fire, did not diminish its impact because a single hit was frequently sufficient. At the gates of Berlin in 1945, IS-2 battalions led the urban assault. The Germans inside those buildings knew exactly what was coming for them. Number 12. Centurion, United Kingdom, 1945. The Centurion's danger was built on something rare in armor design: genuine versatility sustained across decades. Its 105mm L7 gun, fitted in later variants, was accurate, powerful, and capable of defeating the armor of Soviet T-54s and T-55s at combat ranges, a fact confirmed in Israeli service during the 1967 and 1973 wars. In the Sinai, Israeli Centurion crews engaged Egyptian and Syrian armor at distances and in conditions that exposed the quality of their fire control and gunnery training, and the tank's inherent accuracy rewarded both. Documented engagements record Centurions destroying multiple enemy tanks in single actions while sustaining hits that earlier designs would not have survived. In Korea, it climbed terrain that tactical doctrine had declared impassable for armor, appearing where defenders had not prepared for tanks. In Vietnam, it provided infantry with armored fire support that fundamentally altered the survivability of dismounted troops in contact. The Centurion was dangerous because it remained relevant, technically capable, mechanically reliable, and accurate across a span of conflicts that stretched from 1950 to the 1980s. Few tanks in history have sustained that standard for so long. Number 13. T-54-55, Soviet Union, 1947. The T-54-55 was dangerous in the most straightforward and consequential sense. It was everywhere, it worked, and virtually no army fighting a Cold War proxy conflict could ignore it. Its 100mm gun was effective against the majority of Western tanks in service through the 1960s, and its sloped armor, angled to maximize effective thickness against kinetic penetrators, made it substantially more resistant to contemporary anti-tank weapons than its weight suggested. In the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, Egyptian T-54s threatened Israeli armor in the Sinai until Israeli gunnery training and fire control proved decisive at medium range. In Vietnam, North Vietnamese T-54s breached the defenses of the presidential palace in Saigon in April 1975, a moment that became one of the defining images of the 20th century. In Angola, Afghanistan, the Western Sahara, and across sub-Saharan Africa, the T-54-55 outlasted the political systems that had exported it, continuing to fight in conflicts its Soviet designers could not have anticipated. More than 100,000 produced across Soviet and licensed manufacture. The T-54-55 was dangerous because its combination of firepower, protection, reliability, and availability made it the defining armored threat of an entire era of warfare. Number 14. M48 Patton, United States, 1952. The M48 Patton was the standard by which Western armor measured itself through the late 1950s and 1960s, and against the Soviet tanks it was designed to face, it was a credible and lethal adversary. Its 90mm gun could defeat T-54 armor at medium combat ranges, and its fire control system, while primitive by later standards, was more refined than anything in the Soviet inventory at the time of the M48's introduction. In Israeli service during the 1967 Six-Day War, M48s, upgraded with the British 105mm L7 gun, performed with exceptional lethality, contributing to the destruction of Egyptian, Jordanian, and Syrian armor across multiple simultaneous fronts in conditions of extreme operational tempo. Israeli M48 crews destroyed far greater numbers of Soviet-supplied tanks than they lost. In Vietnam, the M48's 90mm gun and coaxial machine guns proved devastatingly effective in direct fire support of infantry, a role for which it was not originally designed but which it fulfilled with reliability. The tank's gasoline engine presented fire risk, and its armor was adequate rather than superior, but within the context of its era, the M48 was precisely what a dangerous tank needed to be: accurate, mobile, and lethal at range. Number 15. Leopard 1, West Germany, 1965. The Leopard 1's danger resided in a combination that German engineers had carefully balanced: exceptional mobility, and a 105mm L7 gun that was, at the time of its introduction, among the most accurate and lethal tank weapons in the world. That gun, the same weapon fitted to upgraded Israeli Centurions and American M60s, could defeat Soviet T-54-55 armor at ranges beyond 2,000 meters, and the Leopard 1's superior speed and cross-country agility meant it could reach firing positions and disengage before slower adversaries could respond effectively. In simulated NATO exercises through the late 1960s and 1970s, Leopard 1 crews consistently demonstrated that mobility-based tactics could compensate for thinner armor, appearing, engaging, and withdrawing before the engagement could be decided by protection alone. Its export success, adopted by 12 nations across 3 continents, reflected a genuine international assessment of its combat value. The Leopard 1's danger was the danger of a precision instrument in skilled hands, not the ability to absorb punishment, but the ability to deliver it accurately before the enemy could dictate the terms of the fight. Number 16. T-64, Soviet Union, 1966. The T-64 was the most technologically dangerous tank the Soviet Union had ever fielded at the time of its introduction, a vehicle whose combination of capabilities genuinely alarmed NATO intelligence when its characteristics became known. Its 125mm smoothbore gun, loaded automatically, fired ammunition that could defeat the frontal armor of any Western tank then in service, including early Leopard 1s and M60s, at ranges beyond 2,000 meters. Its composite armor, incorporating ceramic elements, provided protection that substantially exceeded what Western analysts had assumed possible at the T-64's weight class, meaning that the anti-tank ammunition NATO had stockpiled for anticipated engagements was less effective against it than planned. The autoloader allowed a crew of 3 to maintain a rate of fire previously requiring 4, reducing the tank's profile and its crew's exposure simultaneously. NATO rushed to assess and respond. The development timeline of the Leopard 2 and M1 Abrams was directly accelerated by intelligence on the T-64. That a tank's chronic mechanical unreliability ultimately prevented it from being exported or trusted to Allied armies does not diminish what it represented the moment Soviet armor achieved genuine technical parity with Western design. Number 17. M60 Patton, United States, 1960. The M60 was the most capable American tank of its generation, and in the context of the engagements it actually fought, it demonstrated a battlefield lethality that justified that assessment. Its 105mm M68 gun, the American-licensed version of the British L7, was one of the most accurate tank weapons in the world through the 1960s and 1970s, capable of first-round hits on moving targets at ranges that exceeded most Soviet fire control capabilities of the same period. In Israeli service as the Maguk, M60s destroyed T-54s, T-55s, and T-62s in the 1973 Yom Kippur War in large numbers, even as the war's opening hours exposed the devastating effectiveness of Soviet anti-tank guided missiles against any tank operating without infantry support. Israeli M60 crews who survived those opening hours and who adapted their tactics to suppress missile teams demonstrated the tank's genuine lethality when properly employed. The M60 was dangerous because its gun could kill anything it was likely to face, and its fire control could find those targets under conditions, night, dust, movement, that degraded Soviet accuracy far more severely than American. Number 18. Chieftain, United Kingdom, 1966. The Chieftain was, without qualification, the most powerfully armed tank in the Western world at the time of its introduction, and that gun was its defining danger. Its 120mm L11 rifled gun fired the most energetic kinetic energy rounds available to any NATO nation, capable of defeating the frontal armor of Soviet T-62s and early T-64s at combat ranges that gave Chieftain crews a first-shot kill advantage before most adversaries could effectively return fire. British gunnery doctrine combined with the Chieftain's exceptional gun stabilization and ranging systems meant that its crews could engage accurately while moving, a capability that significantly enhanced survivability in offensive operations. NATO assessments throughout the late 1960s consistently rated the Chieftain's firepower as the highest of any alliance member's tank. In Iranian service during the Iran-Iraq War, Chieftains destroyed Iraqi T-55s and T-62s at favorable kill ratios in engagements where they could be maintained and crewed effectively. The Chieftain's persistent engine unreliability was a serious operational liability, but within range of a working vehicle, its 120mm gun made it one of the most lethal tank-killing platforms of the Cold War era. Number 19. T-72, Soviet Union, 1971. The T-72 was designed to be dangerous in most practical sense, lethal enough to destroy Western tanks, simple enough to be maintained by conscript armies, and cheap enough to be produced and fielded in numbers that could overwhelm NATO's defensive depth by sheer mass. Its 125mm Tu-A46 smoothbore gun, firing Soviet-developed ammunition, was capable of defeating M60 and early Leopard 1 armor at combat ranges, and in the hands of trained Soviet crews operating against enemies without equivalent fire control, it was a genuine threat at medium distance. Soviet doctrine envisioned T-72 formations advancing in waves too dense and too fast for NATO anti-tank systems to attrite before they closed to decisive range. The numbers were the danger. At peak production, Soviet factories produced T-72s at a rate that NATO planners considered unmatched by any defensive response short of nuclear weapons. The T-72's poor performance in Gulf War export variants obscured the fact that Soviet frontline models carried substantially better ammunition and armor, a distinction that Western analysts noted carefully. In the hands of the Army it was built for, fighting the war it was designed for, the T-72 represented a quantitative and qualitative threat that kept NATO defense planners awake through 2 decades of the Cold War. Number 20. Merkava Mark I, Israel, 1979. The Merkava was dangerous in a way uniquely shaped by Israel's strategic situation, not merely by what it could destroy, but by how long it could keep fighting while being destroyed. Its front-mounted engine absorbed hits that would have reached the crew in any conventionally designed tank, and its rear access hatch allowed damaged vehicles to evacuate wounded and continue operating with replacement crew under fire. In the 1982 Lebanon War, Merkava Mark is engaged Syrian T-72s in the Bekaa Valley, a confrontation between Israel's newest tank and the Soviet Union's most modern export armor. Israeli crews destroyed Syrian T-72s at engagement distances that favored the Merkava's accurate 105mm gun and superior fire control, while the Merkava's survivability ensured that damaged vehicles remained in the fight longer than their opponents anticipated. Syrian commanders reported that Merkavas that should have been mission-killed continued to engage. The tank's danger was compound. It could kill effectively, it absorbed punishment that disabled other tanks, and it kept its crews, Israel's most irreplaceable resource, alive to fight again. Against an adversary for whom crew attrition was strategically acceptable, that combination was profoundly threatening. Number 21. M1 Abrams, United States, 1980. The M1 Abrams redefined what dangerous meant for an entire generation of armored warfare. Its Chobham-derived composite armor provided protection that rendered it effectively immune to the 125mm guns of T-72 export variants at most combat ranges, a protection advantage so significant that Iraqi crews reported firing at Abrams tanks and watching rounds deflect or fail to penetrate. Its 120mm M256 smoothbore gun, firing M829 depleted uranium penetrators, could defeat any armor in the world's inventories at the ranges its thermal optics could acquire targets. And those optics, second-generation thermal imaging that functioned in complete darkness, rain, and dust storms, allowed Abrams crews to detect, track, and engage Iraqi tanks that could not see them at all. In the Gulf War's ground campaign, Abrams tanks destroyed over 2,000 Iraqi armored vehicles. Coalition forces lost fewer than 10 Abrams to enemy action across the entire conflict. In one documented engagement, a single Abrams company destroyed an entire Iraqi armored battalion without loss. The M1's danger was the danger of combined superiority across every dimension simultaneously: armor, firepower, mobility, and the ability to see and kill before being seen. Number 22. Challenger 1, United Kingdom, 1983. The Challenger 1 was, in the Gulf War, the most combat-proven tank in the world, and its performance there established it as one of the most dangerous armored vehicles of its era. Its Chobham composite armor was tested under actual combat conditions and proved impervious to every Iraqi anti-tank system encountered, including T-72 125mm guns, anti-tank guided missiles, and rocket-propelled grenades. Not a single Challenger 1 was destroyed by enemy fire during the ground campaign, a record achieved against an opponent fielding thousands of armor vehicles and possessing significant anti-tank capability. Its 120mm rifled gun, firing Char kinetic energy rounds, delivered the longest confirmed tank kill in history. A Iraqi tank destroyed at a range of approximately 5,100 meters by a Challenger of the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards, a distance at which the target could not have identified, let alone engaged, its attacker. That combination, absolute protection against the threats it faced and offensive range, exceeding anything its adversaries could match, made the Challenger 1 in 1991 not merely dangerous, but categorically dominant within its operational context. Number 23. Leclerc, France, 1992. The Leclerc's danger was constructed around speed of decision, the capacity to identify, engage, and destroy an adversary before that adversary could complete the same sequence. Its hunter-killer fire control allowed the commander and gunner to track separate targets simultaneously, enabling the Leclerc to engage one tank while already designating the next, a multi-target engagement capability that contemporary Soviet-era designs could not match. Its auto-loaded 120mm gun maintained a rate of fire of 15 rounds per minute, faster than any manually loaded equivalent, meaning that in a close-range engagement against multiple targets, a Leclerc crew could generate a volume of accurate fire that overwhelmed adversaries' ability to respond. At ranges beyond 3,500 meters, its thermal imaging suite could acquire and engage targets in conditions of total darkness or heavy obscuration that would have blinded earlier tank generations entirely. In UAE service in Yemen, the operational environment exposed Leclercs to threats: urban terrain, IEDs, anti-tank guided missiles fired at close range, for which no tank is optimally designed. But in the open terrain armored engagement it was built to dominate, the Leclerc's combination of speed, accuracy, and fire rate made it one of the most dangerous tank versus tank weapons ever produced. Number 24. K2 Black Panther, South Korea, 2014. The K2 Black Panther is dangerous in the most comprehensive sense that contemporary armored engineering can achieve. Its 120mm smoothbore gun, combined with an auto-loader and a fire control system capable of tracking aerial targets, including low-flying helicopters, gives it an engagement envelope that exceeds virtually every tank currently in production. The hunter-killer system allows the commander to designate targets independently while the gunner engages a separate adversary, collapsing the time between contact and kill in multi-threat environments to a degree that earlier tank generations could not approach. Its active protection system, the KPS, Korean Active Protection System, can detect, track, and defeat incoming anti-tank guided missiles and rocket-propelled grenades before they reach the vehicle, addressing the missile threat that has defined armored vulnerability since the 1970s. Its hydropneumatic suspension adjusts ground clearance in motion, allowing it to optimize its firing position dynamically during engagements. Against the threat environment of the Korean Peninsula, dense with artillery, missiles, and armor, the K-2 was designed to survive and kill in conditions of extraordinary lethality. It represents the current answer to a question armor has been asking since 1916. What does the most dangerous tank possible actually look like? If you enjoyed learning about the most dangerous tanks ever built, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the like button, and stay tuned for more military history content. Thanks for watching this video.